So that's this next game that we want to talk about. Frankfurt against Gladbach, two teams with Champions League aspirations, maybe as well. Gladbach, maybe not quite as much, but they are in and around those teams that are snooping about, right? The Champions League spot. Gladbach are 7th with 30 points, so they are just 3 points behind 4th place. Leipzig and Frankfurt, of course, with 38 points. They are 3rd. Look, this is the number one question, and the number one thing that everyone is going to wonder is Micky Batshuayi going to have the exact same Bundesliga debut that he had 7 years ago? Do you have this? Exactly 7 years ago, on match day 21, he made his Bundesliga debut for Borussia Dortmund, and he scored a brace in Dortmund's 3-2 win over Cologne. I think it's kind of cool I personally think it's kind of cool he's back. I know he's going to be a bench player. Hearing Frankfurt's officials talking between the line, they very much want to give this attacking line to Hugo Ekitike, and Can Ozun was going to play right behind him, right, and slowly but surely fill that role that Omar Marmoush has left behind. And Frankfurt are a very young squad with a ton of talent. And I think, the Batshuayi thing, I think they're bringing him in. And he scored 27 goals in 55 games for Belgium. So it's not like this guy doesn't know how to score goals, right? I mean, this is a guy with a pretty good track record. But I think I was thinking a bit about this today. I think he could be kind of like what Boniface is for Leverkusen at a smaller level. He could be for Eintracht Frankfurt. Boniface comes in midweek and scores this incredible goal off the bench to win the game against Cologne. And he's such a different physical force to Patrick Schick, even though Patrick Schick is quite a big guy too. But it's just different. Like, he's more of a bull, right? And Hugo Ekitike it's the same with Hugo Ekitike. He's a very kind of athletic, technically gifted striker, likes to play a little bit around the box. And if things aren't going well for you, you can just throw Batshuayi in there, and you just know he's going to probably get you a goal or two, even with limited playing time. And I just think that makes it such a fascinating signing. And it wouldn't shock me that, Frankfurt down 2 goals, Batshuayi comes on and he repeats his historic Bundesliga debut with a Bundesliga comeback exactly 7 years later.
I mean, I love your optimism, Manu, and I love your optimism that 7 years is nothing for a man who's not far off our age.
The crazy thing is,
if you asked me to do
I can't believe it's 7 years.
Yeah, exactly.
I can't believe it's 7 years.
Sure, if he was sitting here right now, he'd probably have an eyebrow raised at the thought of doing what he used to do 7 years ago on the football pitch. Look, he's not a spring chicken, but of course he's not either some retired old general either. He's still a great player. I think it's a smart signing. I think Frankfurt definitely needs some more recruits in there, obviously. They can't just rely on Hugo Ekitike to do that. I wrote a newsletter a few weeks ago on, how did Frankfurt replace Omar Marmoush, and I basically explained that Hugo Ekitike is basically playing, if you actually look at his stats, he's basically playing the best career he's had to date over the course of his entire season. His stats for Frankfurt this season are better than his stats were in Ligue 1 before PSG signed him. So the point I was making was that if he's already at that level and doing so well, you can't exactly expect him to then double that to compensate for Omar Marmoush's goals and assists. So obviously it makes sense they have to go out and sign 2 strikers, which they have now done.
Yeah.
Batshuayi. You're right. Batshuayi could come in. He could be just such a, as we said on the bonus show, the reaction show, we're talking about Boniface's goal against Augsburg, and the way that he's this kind of wrecking ball that Leverkusen were able to throw on in that game, and it just completely crippled Cologne. Yeah, Batshuayi can be the exact same thing for Frankfurt. And, that might be exactly what they need, because if you do kind of look at their recent performances, they haven't actually been great. They're unbeaten in the last 5 games in the Bundesliga, but if you actually look at those last 2 games in particular, the game against Wolfsburg, they weren't great in that match. Wolfsburg actually dominated that match for most of the game, and then Frankfurt kind of got back into it at the end, and I thought we're quite lucky to get a point from that. Equally, the Hoffenheim game, they draw 2-2. Hoffenheim hit the bar with probably the biggest miss So they hit the post, the biggest miss of the season, open goal. And Hoffenheim probably should have won that game 3-2. And, before that, obviously they have a 2-0 win over Dortmund and a 4-1 over Freiburg. And then they had a 1-0 win over St. Pauli, which I think was maybe Omar Marmoush's last game at the club. And that was a game in which I thought they were quite lucky as well. So I don't know. I feel like if you had to kind of look at the Bundesliga table right now and kind of maybe add up all their XG and stuff, then maybe you'd be kind of saying that Frankfurt have been kind of riding their luck a little bit recently. And then of course they now come up against a Gladbach team who have actually really got their act together, particularly at home. They've got the 6th best home record, I think, in the league. They've only lost one of the last 5 home matches. And talking about goal scorers, they've got their own goal scorer, obviously, in Tim Kleindienst. So I think this is going to be a real test for Frankfurt. I think if you'd asked me this game 2 months ago, I would have said this game has, 3 or 4-0 win for Frankfurt written all over it. But the manner in which Gladbach, I think, have managed to really kind of turn things around, specifically at home, I think is really, really impressive. And, so much so, actually, that I was just checking the stats today, and they've only been losing at halftime once in 10 home games this season. Which I just think goes to show that they've obviously got that firepower up front, but they've also managed to kind of fix things in defence as well. Honorat's kind of looking back to his usual best as well. Players setting up as well. And yeah, I just think Gerardo Siona's kind of managed to put that team together perfectly well, and the Foles look like a serious outfit, and one that Frankfurt will have to be their absolute best to beat.
So Frankfurt, 3rd in the Bundesliga with 45 goals, right? And this is from the Bundesliga app. This is the AWS XG, or expected goals, right? And they are 10th in shot efficiency. So they're only outperforming the XG by 2.3 goals. First in that list is Bayer Leverkusen with plus 8.5, followed by Wolfsburg with plus 8.1 and Bayern Munich with plus 7.5. 11th behind Eintracht Frankfurt is Borussia Mönchengladbach with minus 2.6. So Gladbach should actually be doing better. Frankfurt probably right on the money then. I mean, that's actually kind of interesting that even though they're the 3rd best team in terms of scoring, it is pretty much what Frankfurt is doing is pretty much expected from the chances that they've created. They're really good. They were really good in chance creation. And I mean, they had a really efficient striker in Omar Marmoush, right? And when you go then onto the goal list and you see where Gladbach is at 10th, and should probably have a couple of goals more, which would put them into the Leipzig territory. And that is despite the fact that in Tim Kleindienst, I think Gladbach actually have one of the most efficient strikers in the game, right?
Yeah.
That XG, wasn't it? I think it was against Leverkusen where he missed a really big chance.
Possibly.
He hit a post a couple times as well.
Yeah.
But it
actually...
really
interesting. Sorry, when you go.
Well, I just thought it just shows that also, even though Gladbach are underperforming the XG, they're still right in and around that Champions League competition. So, there's probably room for growth here.
Yeah, it's interesting. Just as you mentioned that, I kind of jumped onto Gladbach's page. I was looking at the individual players' XG. I don't want to get too into the weeds of this because I know a lot of our listeners probably don't really care about this stuff.
Yeah,
but
people either love or hate it.
Yeah, exactly. The interesting thing is, though, if you look at Omar Marmoush's XG in the Bundesliga before he left, he scored 15 goals, and his XG was at 10.4. Whereas Hugo Ekitiké's got 11 goals and his XG was about 13. So Marmoush was basically consistently creating goals out of very hard chances, which makes total sense because we can all think of like the insane long-range shots he was scoring and the free kicks he was knocking in from like 40 yards and things like that. While Hugo Ekitike, much more of a kind of traditional striker, is doing perfectly well by all means, but he's not performing at that kind of insane, godly level that Marmoush was. So it'll be interesting to see how Frankfurt managed to compensate for losing a striker who was not only scoring a bunch of goals, but he was scoring probably scoring more goals than he should have done. Basically, everything he touched turned to gold, Marmoush. And it's just going to be so interesting to see if Frankfurt can compensate for that. Because if you do look through the team, it's almost like Marmoush and, to be fair, Hugo Ekitike were really compensating for people just not really stepping up. I mean, Hugo Larsson, 2 goals this season. Mario Götze, 2 goals. Angzer, now, sorry, can't speak. I've got chewing on my tongue here. Has only scored 1 goal this season in 19 appearances. There's a lot of players in that team who really need to step up, you know, and obviously they've picked up a couple of strikers, and yeah, that's fine. We'll see how well they do. But a team with Champions League aspirations like Frankfurt, or a team who want to confirm their spot as a top 4 side, really should be kind of putting together a squad that have a number of, you know, a number of goal scorers in them. And yeah, I just think that's really interesting to keep an eye on in terms of who can actually kind of compensate over the rest of the season. Maybe it'll be the strikers who've come in. Maybe now for someone who'll kind of step up and make a big difference there. But yeah, this game against Gladbach, I think, will be a really good test for all of them.
Can Ozun too. He had a really high, double digits in goals and assists as an 18-year-old in the Zweite Bundesliga. One of the many Nuremberg talents that have left the club. I wrote my newsletter, of course, on Nuremberg, and when you put last season, this season, and already the fact that they sold Kastrup to Gladbach, if you put that all together, they earned 60 million euros from player sales as a second division side in like 3 windows, which is, for a second division team in German football, is extraordinary. And you know, so Can Ozun is a player I think that has the potential to reach that kind of goal scoring output, and is, I think, someone who can also, you know, move into that void left by Omar Marmoush, as is Wahi, and then of course we highlighted Batshuayi. Gladbach are a little bit more one-dimensional in that sense, with like Kleindienst, and there was some concerns about Kleindienst, whether he's going to be fit or not for this game. I tell you what, if Kleindienst isn't fit for this game, Gladbach are going to be in a bunch of trouble, because it also looks like the player, he didn't train much this week. He might also be struggling, and if both of them aren't playing, then Gladbach could be in trouble here.
Yeah, no doubt about it. It's definitely one we'll have to check before kickoff to double check about that one. But yeah, we'll see how it goes. But yeah, you're right. They're just dependent on Kleindienst as Frankfurt have been on Omar Marmoush and Hugo Ekitike.